When the ER doctor read my son's last name, the hospital went silent, because the next call wasn't to pediatrics, it was to his father. Where are you listening from today? Drop your country in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the man I divorced walks in and realizes I've been hiding his child. The automatic doors slid open with a tired hiss as I stumbled into the emergency room, the sound swallowed by fluorescent light and the low murmur of late-night exhaustion. My arms ached from carrying him, but I didn't dare put him down. Not yet. His small body burned against my chest, fever hot even through his jacket, his breath coming in shallow puffs that made every muscle in my spine lock with fear. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, more for myself than for him. "We're here." My son whimpered, his forehead pressed weakly into the hollow of my neck. He hadn't cried much on the drive, just those soft, broken sounds that were worse than screaming, the kind that meant he didn't have the strength left. The clock above the reception desk read 2:07 a.m. Of course it did. Things like this always happened when there was no one to call, no one to help, no room for mistakes. I approached the intake desk, shifting him to my other hip when my arms started to shake. The woman behind the computer looked tired, but kind, her hair pulled into a loose bun, her coffee long forgotten beside the keyboard. "Name?" she asked gently, fingers poised. I swallowed. My son has a fever. It spiked suddenly. He's been vomiting. He's dizzy. I'm sorry. I know it's late. You did the right thing," she said quickly. "We'll take care of him." "What's his name?" I adjusted my grip and forced my voice steady. "Luca." She smiled faintly. "Last name." This was the part I always hated. Not because the name itself hurt, but because it reminded me of everything I'd spent 5 years outrunning. I hesitated for less than a second. Long enough. "Rossi," I said quietly. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. It was subtle. So subtle I might have missed it if fear hadn't sharpened every sense. A fractional stillness. A flicker of something unreadable crossing her face before she masked it. "Rossi," she repeated slower this time. My stomach dropped. "Yes," I said quickly, too quickly. Does that matter? He's really sick. I don't have insurance right now, but I can work out a payment plan. No, she said, already shaking her head, smile back in place. "That's fine, of course. We'll get him seen right away." She typed rapidly, eyes scanning the screen longer than necessary. Then she glanced up at Luca again. Really looked at him this time. At his dark lashes clumped with sweat. At his strong little nose. At the sharp line of his jaw I had learned to pretend came from my side of the family. Something in her expression changed. "Date of birth?" she asked. I answered. She entered it, then frowned slightly as though confirming something no one had said aloud. She stood, smoothing the front of her scrubs. "Let me just get a triage nurse," she said. "We're going to take him back right now." Right now. Not "please have a seat," not "we'll call you when a bed opens." Not "it might be a wait." A man in navy scrubs appeared almost instantly, wheeling a gurney that looked absurdly large next to my small, fever-racked child. "I can carry him," I said reflexively. "That's okay, ma'am," the nurse replied. "We've got him." I should have insisted. I should have refused to let go. But when Luca moaned softly and clutched weakly at my shirt, my resolve cracked, replaced by the raw animal fear that had been gnawing at me since his skin first turned too hot under my palm. They laid him down gently, covering him with a warm blanket. "Mommy?" he whispered, eyelids fluttering. "I'm right here," I said, grabbing his hand, my thumb tracing circles over his knuckles. "I'm not going anywhere." The triage nurse glanced at the intake screen, then at the receptionist. "Last name?" he asked. "Rossi," she replied again. This time there was no mistaking it. His jaw tightened. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then turned and spoke quietly into a phone clipped to his collar. I couldn't hear the words, only the shift in tone, the sudden seriousness, the way another nurse looked up when she heard his voice and immediately moved closer. Is something wrong? I asked, panic slicing through my chest. Just routine, he said smoothly. We'll get some vitals and labs right away. Routine didn't involve extra staff appearing out of nowhere. Routine didn't involve security stepping closer to the doors. Routine didn't make the receptionist pick up her phone and turn her body slightly away from me as she spoke in a low, careful voice. I caught only a fragment as we were wheeled past. Yes, that last name. No, the child. Fever. He's here. My heart slammed into my ribs. Here? I tightened my grip on Luca's hand, my mind racing through 5 years of distance, hiding, scraped together rent payments, late nights rocking a sick child alone, telling myself over and over that I'd done the right thing. That disappearing had kept him safe, that this city was far enough, that names didn't carry power. As we turned down the hallway, the lights seemed brighter, the air heavier. Doors closed behind us with a quiet finality that made my pulse spike. I've got you, I whispered fiercely, even as dread pooled in my stomach. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't just another hospital night anymore. And the man I had run from 5 years ago was about to find us. The doctor stopped at the foot of the gurney and looked down at the chart. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp, no curse, no raised voice. Just a pause, too long to be accidental, and a minute adjustment of posture, as if something invisible had suddenly clicked into place. Then he glanced at my son, really looked at him, at the flushed skin, the way his chest rose too fast beneath the thin hospital blanket, the name band around his wrist. His expression didn't harden. It sharpened. How high did the fever get? He asked, already reaching for gloves. 104, I said quickly. I gave him acetaminophen, but it barely helped. He started shaking in the car. I've never seen him like this. Any history of seizures? No? Vomiting? Yes, twice. He nodded, eyes flicking back to the chart. And you said his last name is Rossi. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said, dread creeping up my spine. Is something... We need a room, he said, suddenly straightening. Now. The triage nurse blinked. All the bays are... A private one, the doctor cut in, calm but unmistakably firm. Call it. The nurse hesitated just a fraction of a second before nodding and turning away, already speaking rapidly into her headset. Private. The word hit me harder than it should have. I don't understand, I said, struggling to keep up as they began wheeling Luca down a different corridor. Not the open ER bays where curtains offered flimsy privacy, but toward a wing I'd only ever seen in movies. Glass doors, solid walls, a keypad. This isn't necessary, I said. We can wait. I don't want special... It's protocol, the doctor said, still not looking at me. That word again. Protocol. The gurney slowed in front of a set of sliding doors. As they opened, I noticed 2 men standing just inside the threshold. Not in scrubs, not in uniforms. Black jackets, earpieces. Security. One of them gave a subtle nod as Luca was wheeled past, his gaze sweeping the hallway behind us like he was expecting trouble to follow. For crowd control, the nurse said quickly when she caught me staring. Too quickly. We've had some incidents lately. Incidents at 2 a.m? My pulse thundered in my ears as they transferred Luca to a hospital bed in a private bay that looked more like a hotel room than an ER space. Monitors beeped softly as wires were attached. A blood pressure cuff tightened around his small arm, making him flinch. Ow, he murmured. I'm here, I said instantly, brushing damp curls from his forehead. You're doing so good, sweetheart. So brave. The doctor's tone softened slightly as he addressed my son, but when he turned back to me, the edge returned. How long has he had this name? He asked, keeping his voice low. I stared at him. Since birth. Why does that matter? Another pause, another glance at the chart. Any contact with his father? He asked. The room tilted. No, I said, too fast again. That's not relevant. The doctor's eyes met mine for the first time. Dark, assessing, careful. "It might be," he said gently. Medically speaking. That was a lie. We both knew it. I felt it in the way the security outside the glass shifted positions. In the way a nurse stepped into the hallway and spoke into her phone with her back turned to me. In the way the doctor adjusted his badge and lowered his voice even further. "We're going to start fluids and run labs immediately," he continued. "Blood work, cultures, imaging, if needed." "Is he in danger?" I asked, fear clawing its way up my throat. He hesitated. "He's sick," he said carefully. "But that's not why we're taking precautions." Precautions. My stomach churned. Then why? Instead of answering, he turned to the nurse. "Has the call been placed?" "Yes," she replied. "They're aware." Aware of what? Of whom? My hand tightened around Luca's. His eyes fluttered open again, glassy with fever. "Mom," he whispered, "why are there so many people?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face in half. "Just doctors," I said softly. "They want to help you feel better." But even as I spoke, another man appeared at the doorway. Older, in a suit, not a lab coat. He scanned the room, then nodded once at the doctor. The doctor finally exhaled, as if a decision had been made somewhere far above his authority. "We're going to take good care of your son," he said to me, voice calm, steady. "But I need you to understand something." He leaned closer. "From this moment on," he said quietly, "this case isn't just medical anymore." Cold slid down my spine, every instinct I'd honed over 5 years screaming in unison. This wasn't about a fever. This wasn't about a hospital. This was about a name. And whatever power it carried through those doors with my son at 2 a.m. I noticed the phone before I noticed anything else. It wasn't the standard hospital handset mounted to the wall. It was sleeker, black. The kind of phone that didn't belong in an ER room full of worn equipment and scuffed linoleum floors. The doctor reached into his coat pocket and pulled it out with practiced ease, turning slightly away from me as he glanced at the screen. My pulse started to race. Hospitals didn't make calls like that for fevers. "I'll be right outside," he said, already stepping toward the glass wall. "If you need anything, press the call button." Wait, I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to keep it steady. "You said labs first? Shouldn't you call pediatrics?" He paused. Just long enough. "We're coordinating," he replied smoothly, then slid out into the corridor. The glass wall didn't muffle sound as well as they thought. I sat stiffly in the chair beside Luca's bed, one hand tangled in his fingers as his chest rose and fell too fast beneath the thin blanket. The monitor beeped steadily, a mechanical reminder that he was still here, still breathing, still mine. Outside, the doctor lowered his voice, but not enough. "I'm looking at the chart now," he said. "Yes, confirmed. Name and date of birth match." I felt my stomach hollow out. My son stirred. "Mom, I'm cold." I pulled the blanket higher, tucking it around his shoulders, even as my ears strained toward the glass. "Yes," the doctor continued. "High fever. Acute onset. He's stable for now." A pause, then the words that sliced straight through me. "It's his child. He's here." The world went utterly silent. Not in the room. Machines still beeped, footsteps echoed in the hallway. But inside me, like something vital had been switched off, leaving only cold. His child. "He's here." I gripped the edge of the bed so hard my knuckles burned. No. No, no, no. I had chosen this hospital because it was across the city, because it wasn't near the neighborhoods he owned, because I had told myself 5 years was enough distance to make a name harmless. I had been wrong. Outside, the doctor turned his back further, but the damage was already done. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "He arrived with the mother. She's unaware." Mother. Like I was a footnote. Like I hadn't been the one who stayed up nights counting breaths, who learned how to spot dehydration, who held a vomiting child on cramped bathroom floors while whispering reassurances I didn't feel. I barely heard the next words, but they landed anyway. "Security is in place. Private Bay. As requested." Requested! My breath came shallow. The air felt too thin, like the oxygen had been quietly siphoned from the room. Luca whimpered, his fingers tightening weakly around mine. "Mommy?" "I'm here," I said automatically, though my voice sounded far away, even to me. "I'm right here." But my mind had already gone somewhere else. 5 years earlier, a courthouse that smelled like old coffee and regret. A signature that shook because I knew what it would cost me to leave, and what it would cost me if I stayed. I hadn't just divorced him. I had vanished, changed cities, changed jobs, changed my phone number twice. I had carried a secret beneath my heart and sworn I would never let it touch his world. Because men like him didn't share custody. They claimed. Outside the glass, the doctor ended the call. He stood still for a moment, shoulders squared, as if bracing himself, then slid the phone back into his pocket. Almost immediately, another phone rang. This one attached to the wall. A nurse answered. Her posture changed mid-sentence. Straighter, more alert. "Yes," she said. "Understood." Security shifted again, one man moving closer to the door, another scanning the hallway as though expecting someone important to arrive at any moment. I felt suddenly, acutely trapped. I rose from the chair, every instinct screaming to pick up my son and run. But where would I go? He was sick. He was attached to monitors. And the exits were no longer just exits. They were watched. The doctor re-entered the room, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. His expression was neutral, professional, but his eyes flicked to Luca, then back to me, as if seeing us differently now. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing the words out past the tightness in my throat. "Yes," he said. "For now." "For now?" I echoed. He hesitated, then sighed quietly, rubbing a hand over his jaw like a man who hated what came next. "There's someone who needs to be informed," he said carefully. "Someone with authority." "I am his mother," I snapped, fear bleeding into anger. "I'm right here." He met my gaze, something like pity flickering in his eyes. "Yes," he said softly, "but he's his father." The last word landed like a blow. Father. The one word I had kept out of our lives with sheer force of will. And now, because of a fever. A name. A phone call made to the wrong number first. The man I had fled was on his way, and there was nothing left to hide behind. The smell of antiseptic blurred into the past, and suddenly I wasn't in the ER anymore. I was back in a marble courtroom 5 years ago, my heels echoing too loudly on the floor, as if the sound alone could betray how terrified I was. My hands were shaking then, too, clasped so tightly in front of me that my fingers had gone numb. I remember staring at the polished wood of the bench and thinking how cold everything felt. How permanent. He sat across from me, perfectly composed, dark suit tailored to his frame like armor. Not a wrinkle. Not a flicker of uncertainty. Men like him didn't come to court worried about outcomes. They came expecting obedience. Everyone did. His lawyers spoke calmly, efficiently, as though they were discussing a hostile merger instead of the dissolution of a marriage. Assets, properties, non-disclosure clauses, confidential settlements. Words that sounded harmless until you understood what they really meant. Silence, control, erasure. When it was my turn to speak, the judge looked almost apologetic, as if he already knew how this would end. "Are you certain?" he asked me gently. "You're entitled to a great deal, Mrs. "No," I said too quickly. "I don't want anything." That was when I felt his eyes finally burn into me. Not anger, not surprise, curiosity. That was worse. I could have taken houses, accounts, jewelry, protection, status. His people had made that clear. Leaving him didn't have to mean poverty, but it would have meant remaining reachable. And I couldn't afford that. Because 2 days earlier, I'd stood barefoot in a bathroom at 3 in the morning, staring at a thin pink line on a test I hadn't even meant to take. My hands had gone cold. My heart had nearly stopped. Pregnant. By a man whose world ate innocence for breakfast. He hadn't hit me. Not once. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't locked me in a room. That was the lie people told themselves about dangerous men. That if they weren't monsters in obvious ways, they couldn't be monsters at all. But I had seen enough. I had watched men disappear from his table and never be spoken of again. I had seen fear flicker behind smiles at dinner parties. I had overheard phone calls that ended in silence so heavy, it seemed to suffocate the air. I had learned that power didn't always come with violence. Sometimes it came with inevitability. And children became leverage. I had grown up ordinary, broken, maybe, but free. I wanted that for my baby. I wanted scraped knees and school lunches, and a life where love wasn't conditional on loyalty. So when the judge asked again if I was sure, I lifted my chin and said, the bravest lie of my life, yes. I walked out of the courthouse with a single bag and a check so small his lawyer had looked personally offended writing it. No alimony, no contact, no future claims, and no one knew why. I left the city that night, changed my number the next day, took a job no one important would ever notice. I told myself if I stayed quiet enough, small enough, the past would lose interest in me. For years it worked. I held my son for the first time alone, whispering promises I didn't know how to keep. I won't let him find you, I told the tiny life pressed against my chest. I won't let his world touch yours. Luca grew strong, clever, kind. He laughed easily, trusted blindly. He knew nothing of bodyguards or black cars, or men who spoke in lowered voices and moved entire systems with a gesture. I told him his father had died. It was easier than telling the truth. Safer. And now, sitting beside his hospital bed with wires taped to his small arm, I felt 5 years collapse into a single, crushing moment. I had run. Not because I was weak, but because I was a mother before I ever held a child in my arms. I believed distance could protect him. I believed love could outweigh power. And as the door to the ER room remained guarded, as phones rang softly outside, as a name I had buried came back with teeth, I wondered for the first time if I had been wrong. Because the man I ran from was coming, and this time he wasn't just my past. He was my son's father. The shift was subtle at first. So subtle I might have convinced myself it was my imagination if fear hadn't sharpened my senses until every movement felt amplified. A nurse brought warm blankets without being asked. Another appeared with a cup of water I hadn't requested, setting it down beside me with a smile that lingered a second too long. Every person who entered the room made careful eye contact, spoke a little more softly, a little more respectfully, as if I were suddenly fragile, or dangerous, or both. A man in a gray suit arrived not long after the call. Not a doctor, not staff. He wore a hospital badge, but it looked freshly clipped, like it belonged in an office, not on a midnight ER floor. Ms. Rossi, he said, extending his hand through his eyes flicked immediately to Luca. I'm the night administrator. I just wanted to personally assure you your son is receiving the highest level of care. Personally? The word sat wrong in my ears. Thank you, I replied stiffly. When can we go home? His hand paused mid-withdrawal. Oh, he said gently, as if correcting a misunderstanding. That won't be possible right now. My heart thudded. He has a fever. Once it's down, once the labs are back. We'd really prefer to keep him overnight, he interrupted smoothly. Observation is crucial in cases like this. Cases like this. I glanced at the monitors. Luca was dozing now, lashes dark against flushed skin, breathing less labored, but still too fast. I'll take him to a different hospital, I said abruptly, standing. One closer to our apartment. The administrator's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I wouldn't recommend that," he said. "Transport could exacerbate his symptoms. I'll sign whatever form I need to." "I'm afraid we can't allow discharge at this time." "Allow." The word sent a cold wave down my spine. I turned toward the door, and nearly collided with one of the security guards now stationed just outside. He stepped aside politely, but not enough to miss the message. Blocked. "Is something going on that I don't know about?" I demanded, my voice sharp despite the tremor in my hands. Because this is starting to feel less like medical care, and more like something else. The administrator lowered his voice. "Ms. Rossi, please, there's no need to be distressed." That was when I noticed it. The door at the end of the hall, normally propped open, was closed, locked. A soft click echoed as another set of double doors slid shut farther down, isolating our wing entirely. I saw a nurse swipe a badge I hadn't seen before, thicker than the others, metallic. "This is for safety," the administrator continued. "There have been concerns." "Concerns about what?" I snapped. He didn't answer directly, just gestured subtly back toward my son. "About him." My stomach dropped. "You can't do this," I said. "He's a child." "Yes," he agreed immediately, "which is why everyone wants to ensure his well-being." Everyone. The word carried too much weight. Another figure approached, this one older, silver-haired, wearing an expensive coat he hadn't bothered to remove. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. People deferred to him instinctively, stepping aside without being told. He studied Luca through the glass with professional detachment. "The fever?" he asked. "Dropping slightly," a nurse replied, "but still elevated." He nodded once, then looked at me, not unkindly, but not warmly either, like I was a variable, not a person. "Best to keep him here," he said, "until his father arrives." The room spun. His father. I laughed, sharp and hollow. "You can't just summon him like that. I have legal custody." The man's expression didn't change. "This isn't about custody," he said calmly. "It's about protocol." There was that word again. Protocol. The administrator placed a careful hand on my elbow, not gripping, not restraining, just enough pressure to guide rather than allow movement. "Please," he murmured. "Sit. For your son." I looked at Luca, at the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the faint sheen of sweat on his temples, the way his fingers twitched when he dreamed, reaching for me even in sleep. And I sat. Because no matter how wrong this felt, no matter how the hospital walls seemed to close in, no matter how the building had transformed from sanctuary to stronghold, I would not abandon him. Not now. Not ever. As the door locked softly behind us with a final click, I realized with a sick certainty that I hadn't just brought my child to the ER. I had walked straight into enemy territory, and the man who ruled it was on his way. I felt him before I saw him. The air changed, pressure shifting, like the moment before a storm breaks. Conversations in the hallway softened, then stopped altogether. Footsteps slowed. Someone straightened their posture, as if pulled by invisible strings. Then the doors opened. He walked in without hurry, without announcement, as if the hospital belonged to him, and everyone else was simply occupying space until he arrived. His suit was dark, impeccably cut, the kind that didn't wrinkle no matter how long the night or how sharp the confrontation waiting ahead. No coat, no umbrella, as though weather didn't apply to him. Calm. That was the most terrifying part. His gaze swept the room once, efficient, assessing, before landing on the hospital bed. On Luca. The effect was immediate. For one split second, the mask slipped. His breath caught. Not audibly, but in the way his chest tightened, in the way his shoulders stilled as if struck by something solid and painful. He took one step closer to the bed, then stopped, fists curling slowly at his sides. Because there was no mistaking it. The boy's face was pale with fever, lashes dark against flushed skin, but the bones were unmistakable. The strong brow, the straight nose, the exact curve of the jaw. Him, reflected back at him in miniature. I saw the recognition land like a blow. He didn't touch Luca. Didn't speak to him. Not yet. His eyes traced every detail first, cataloging, absorbing, 5 years of absence compressed into a single, brutal moment of truth. Then he looked at me, and the room went cold. No shouting, no accusation hurled across the space, just a slow, deliberate turn of his head, and a look so controlled it took my breath away. This was not a man losing control. This was a man reining it in with effort. "How long?" he asked quietly. The doctor cleared his throat. "The fever spiked tonight. He's stable for now. We're monitoring." He lifted a hand without taking his eyes off me. The doctor fell silent instantly. "How long?" he repeated. "Have you known?" I stood. My legs shook, but I stood anyway, placing myself between him and the bed without thinking. Since the day he was born. Something dark flickered in his eyes. Not surprise, not confusion. Fury, but still his voice remained even. Deadly calm. "And you didn't tell me." It wasn't a question. "I left," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That was the point." His jaw tightened. A muscle jumped near his temple, the only visible crack in his composure. "You disappeared." "Yes." "You signed papers," he continued softly. "Agreements. NDAs. You took nothing." "I wanted nothing." A humorless curve touched his mouth. "You took everything." The words hung heavy between us. He stepped closer, not invading my space, not threatening, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his presence, the restrained violence coiled beneath immaculate control. "You stole 5 years," he said quietly. 5 years I will never get back." "You don't get to talk about theft," I shot back, fear sharpening my anger. "Not after the world you live in. Not after the danger that follows you." His eyes flashed then, but still, his voice never rose. "And you decided that alone," he said, without asking, without giving me the chance to protect my own child. "Protect?" I almost laughed. "You call what surrounds you protection?" I whispered fiercely. "Men disappear around you. Guns, guards, secrets buried so deep they rot. I would never—" He leaned in slightly, just enough to make sure I heard him. "And now look where we are." I faltered. "An ER at 2 in the morning, he continued calmly. "Security on your doors. Doctors making calls you don't understand. Because you thought hiding him made him safe." His gaze slid past me again, back to the bed. "To my enemies," he added quietly. That landed. I felt it then. The shift. Not just fear of him, but fear of what his attention brought. What his recognition triggered. What his claim now made inevitable. Luca stirred, brow furrowing as he sensed the tension. His eyes fluttered open. The man in front of me went still. That fury, every sharp edge of it, was redirected in an instant. Folded away, locked down. He moved around me then, slow and deliberate, kneeling beside the bed as if lowering himself required conscious effort. "Hey," he said softly, voice transformed. "You're brave." Luca blinked up at him, confused but calm in the presence of something instinctively familiar. "Mom," he murmured. "I'm right here," I said quickly. His eyes flicked to me once. Warning, promise, possession, all at once. Then back to the boy. "I'm going to make sure you're okay," he said gently. "Do you understand?" Luca nodded weakly. Good. That single word sat heavy in the air. Because it wasn't reassurance. It was a vow. And standing there in a hospital that had become a fortress, watching the man I had fled kneel beside the son I had hidden, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. I hadn't just lost control of the situation. I had handed him something he would never give back. He didn't raise his voice. That was what made it unbearable. The machines hummed softly. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. Luca slept again, sedated just enough to keep the fever from exhausting him. The room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, but beneath it all, I could still sense him. The man standing at the foot of the bed, controlled rage pulling the oxygen from the space between us. "You lied to me," he said quietly. The words landed heavier than shouting ever could. I let out a slow breath, fingers curling into fists at my sides. "No," I said. "I protected him." His head tilted slightly, an old habit I remembered too well, the way he did when he was trying not to explode. "You disappeared," he said. "You erased yourself. You erased me." "I erased danger," I snapped back, fear and fury finally breaking through. "You think I didn't know what your world would do to a child? I saw it every day. Men with guns at your door, phone calls you never explained, blood on your cuffs you claimed was someone else's problem." His eyes hardened. "You think that gives you the right? It gave me the responsibility," I cut in, "to survive you, to survive your world, to give him a chance." Silence stretched between us. Then he spoke again, softer somehow, more lethal. "I looked for you." The words punched the air from my lungs. "For years," he continued. "You vanished overnight. Your apartment empty, accounts closed, phone disconnected. No trail, no mistake." I stared at him, heartbeat pounding. "I sent people," he went on. "Professionals. I followed leads across 3 states. Every whisper, every shadow." His jaw tightened. Then the trail went cold. I swallowed. I hadn't known. Or maybe I had, and I'd forced myself not to think about it. "And then," he said, voice dropping, "I assumed you'd lost the baby." The room tilted. "Or that you'd chosen not to keep it," he added quietly. "That you spared me the truth because you knew what it would mean." Something inside me cracked. I hugged myself, nails digging into my arms. "I was pregnant," I whispered. "Alone, terrified. And I knew if you found out, you knew I would have come for you." "Yes," I said fiercely, "and that's exactly why I left." His eyes searched my face, as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the version of me he'd carried all these years. "I would have protected him," he said. "You would have claimed him," I shot back. "That's not the same thing." The word struck home. I saw it in the tightening of his jaw, the brief flare of something dangerous behind his eyes, before he mastered it. Behind us, the bed shifted. We both froze. Luca stirred, his brow furrowing as he surfaced from sleep. His lashes fluttered open, eyes glassy but alert. "Mom?" he whispered. I rushed to his side instantly, brushing my thumb over his warm cheek. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." He looked around slowly, confusion clouding his features as he took in the machines, the unfamiliar room, and then the man standing just beyond me. Luca's gaze lingered, studied him. The fever hadn't dulled that part of him, the part that noticed. He frowned slightly. "Mom," he murmured, voice small. "Who's that?" The question sliced through the room. I felt the man behind me go still. I didn't answer right away. My throat closed, emotion clawing its way up from somewhere deep and painful. Before I could decide what to say, he stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, making himself smaller, less threatening. "My name is..." He stopped, swallowed. "My name is Matteo." It wasn't the name the world knew him by. I felt my breath hitch. "I'm a friend," he added gently, kneeling to Luca's eye level. "I'm here to make sure you feel better." Luca studied him with the frank, unfiltered curiosity only children possessed. "You look like me," he said solemnly. The truth of it landed like a bomb. Matteo's breath shuddered. For a fraction of a second I thought he might break right there in the sterile light of the ER. "I do," he said quietly. "That's not a coincidence." Luca's small hand tightened around mine. "You're my mom," he said, as if confirming the most important fact first. "Yes," I said instantly. "Always." His gaze flicked back to Matteo. "Are you my dad?" The world narrowed to that single word. Dad. Matteo didn't look at me. He didn't look at the doctors or the guards or the sealed doors. He only looked at the boy who carried his face. "Yes," he said. Simple. Honest. Unavoidable. Luca processed this slowly, then yawned, eyelids drooping again. "Okay," he murmured as if accepting a new rule of the universe. "Can you help me not feel hot?" "I can," Matteo said hoarsely. "I promise." Luca nodded once, already drifting back to sleep, secure in the faith that adults fixed things. When his breathing evened out again, Matteo stood. And this time, when he looked at me, the fury was still there. But it was layered now with something else. Resolve. "You survived me," he said quietly. "Yes," I answered. "So did he." His gaze dropped briefly to our son, then returned to me. "That may be," he said, "but you should understand something now." I braced myself. "You don't get to disappear again." Not a threat. A fact. And as the hospital hummed around us, locked, guarded, irrevocably changed, I realized with a sinking certainty that the confrontation was over. But the war between us had just begun. I tried to move. Not dramatically, not running. Just a step sideways, placing myself between him and the bed again, instinct rising faster than reason. The same instinct that had carried me across cities, across years, across every hard night when I'd whispered his name into the dark and prayed the past would stay buried. "We don't need to do this now," I said quietly. "He's sick, confused. Let him rest." His eyes never left Luca. "This is exactly when it needs to be done," he replied just as softly. I shook my head. "You can't just walk in and rewrite his world in the middle of the night." That finally drew his gaze to me. Not angry, not triumphant, certain. "I'm not rewriting it," he said. "I'm answering a question you've already forced him to ask." Before I could respond, Luca stirred again, small fingers curling against the sheet like he was searching for something solid to hold on to. "Mama!" His voice was hoarse, fever-dulled. "The room's spinning!" I rushed to his side instantly, brushing his hair back, pressing my lips to his warm forehead. "I know, sweetheart. Just breathe. They're giving you medicine." He nodded weakly, eyes struggling to focus. Then they found him again. The man kneeling at the foot of his bed. "Are you still here?" Luca asked, frowning slightly. "Yes," he said. "I'm still here." There was something unbearably gentle about the way he said it. As if staying was a promise, not an option. He knelt fully now, lowering himself so that his face was level with Luca's. Not looming, not crowding, just present. "I don't want to scare you," he said quietly. "And I don't want you to feel confused." Luca blinked slowly. "I already feel confused." The honesty of it cracked something open in my chest. "That makes sense," he replied. "You've had a long night." "Mom says questions are okay," Luca murmured. His throat worked. "Your mom is right." I reached for Luca's hand, squeezing once, a silent plea. "Don't." But the moment had already passed. "There's something important you asked earlier," he continued gently, "and I don't want to lie to you." I felt the air leave my lungs. Luca swallowed. "I asked if you were my dad." Time slowed. Every machine beep seemed louder. The room shrank until it was just the three of us and the truth hovering, fragile and sharp-edged, between breath and heartbeat. "Yes," he said. One word. Soft, steady. "I'm your father." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed a hand to my mouth, eyes burning as every carefully constructed wall I'd built over 5 years cracked all at once. Luca stared at him. There was no shock, no fear, no anger, just quiet processing. "Oh," he said. That was it. No gasping revelation. No tears. Just that single sound carrying all the weight of a child, rearranging his understanding of the world. "You look like me," Luca added thoughtfully. A flicker of something raw crossed his face. Pain, pride, wonder, all tangled together. "I've noticed," he said. Luca nodded, then yawned, the effort pulling a faint whimper from his throat. "Does that mean you make people give shots?" Despite everything, a sound escaped him. Something like a laugh, caught halfway between breath and ache. "No," he admitted. "I wish I could." Luca considered this. "Can you make the hot go away?" The question shattered me. Not "can you protect me?" Not "why didn't you come sooner?" Just this simple, heartbreaking request. "Yeah," he answered immediately. No hesitation. "I can help with that." "How?" Luca asked. "I'll stay," he said. "And I won't let them stop helping you feel better." Luca seemed satisfied with that answer. His fingers loosened around mine, eyelids drooping. "Okay," he murmured. "That's good." I broke then. Silent tears slid down my cheeks as I watched my son accept a truth I'd feared would destroy him. Accept it with the quiet bravery of a child who only wanted to feel safe. As Luca drifted back into sleep, his breathing evening out again, the man rose slowly to his feet. For a moment he didn't look powerful. He looked undone. When his gaze finally met mine, there was no triumph in it. No satisfaction. Only a gravity so deep it terrified me more than anger ever had. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "I was afraid," I whispered. "I know." That stopped me. "You wouldn't have knelt like that 5 years ago," I said, voice trembling. "No," he agreed. "I wouldn't have been ready to." He glanced down at the bed again, his son's small chest rising steadily now. "I am now." The words settled into the room, irrevocable and heavy with promise. And as the hospital hummed around us, fortress walls locked, power shifting in quiet ways, I understood what terrified me most. Not that he knew, but that Luca had accepted him so easily. As if somewhere deep inside, he had always been waiting. The doctor didn't come alone this time. That was the first sign. 3 of them entered together. Infectious disease, pediatrics, and a surgeon whose calm expression didn't quite hide the urgency beneath it. The door sealed softly behind them, and the monitors seemed suddenly louder, every beep an accusation. I stood before anyone spoke. "What's wrong?" I said. Not a question. A demand. The pediatrician glanced at Matteo, just once, quick and deferential, before turning back to me. "The fever isn't the illness," she said carefully. "It's a symptom." My stomach dropped. "Of what?" She inhaled. "We're seeing markers consistent with an aggressive strain of bacterial meningitis. Rare. Fast-moving." The word hit like ice water. "No," I whispered. "He just had a cold. He was fine this morning." "That's often how it presents," the infectious disease specialist said gently. "We caught it early, which helps. But he's not responding to first-line antibiotics the way we'd like." My knees weakened. Matteo's hand appeared at my elbow, steadying me without asking. I hated that I needed it. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," the surgeon said quietly, "there's swelling. Pressure. If it continues, we may need to intervene to relieve it." "Surgery?" My voice broke. "Possibly. Within hours, not days." The room closed in. Mateo didn't move, didn't flinch. He nodded once as if he were discussing weather, but I felt the tension radiating off him like heat. "Do whatever you need," he said. "You'll have everything. Specialists, equipment. No delays." The doctors nodded, too quickly, too smoothly. When they left, the silence that followed was crushing. I turned to Mateo, fear finally spilling over into anger. "You knew," I accused. "You knew this was worse." "I knew it might be," he said quietly. "That's why I came." I sank into the chair beside Luca's bed, pressing my forehead to his small hand. "This is why I ran," I whispered. "This is exactly why." Footsteps echoed outside the door. More than before. I glanced up and saw security doubling. No, tripling. Men in suits replacing hospital guards, earpieces, quiet voices, controlled movement. "What's happening?" I demanded. Mateo's jaw tightened. The hospital database flagged Luca's name when they escalated his case. It pinged systems it shouldn't have. Cold seeped into my bones. "Your enemies," I said. "Our enemies," he corrected. "And yes, they're moving." As if summoned by the words, his phone vibrated. He answered without greeting, turning slightly away, voice low and lethal. "Say it again." A pause. "How many?" Another pause. Longer. "When?" He ended the call and exhaled slowly through his nose. "They know I have a son," he said. "They know his name. They know he's here." The room swam. "This place isn't safe." "It's safer than anywhere else," he replied immediately. "For now." "For now," I echoed bitterly. "That's what everyone keeps saying." He met my gaze. "I will not let anything happen to him." "You don't get to promise that," I snapped. "Not when your life is the threat." His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. "Then I will burn every road that leads to him," he said evenly. "Starting tonight." More men arrived. I watched the hospital transform completely. Access points sealed, staff rotated, new badges issued. It was no longer an ER wing. It was a stronghold. And Luca lay at its center, unaware that his existence had just redrawn battle lines years in the making. I leaned closer to his bed, brushing my thumb over his cheek, memorizing the curve of his lips, the tiny scar on his chin from falling at the playground last summer. A normal memory. A normal life. "This world will eat him," I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to Mateo or myself. "It won't," Mateo said. "It couldn't touch him before. Not while I didn't know. Now," he stopped, choosing his next words carefully. "Now, no one gets near him without going through me." That was what terrified me most, because I believed him. Because I saw how effortlessly his world had wrapped around us already, tightening with every hour, every alarm, every whisper of threat. I looked at my son, then at the man who had just claimed him openly, irrevocably. And for the first time since the doors had locked, since the phone call, since he walked in, I feared not only losing Luca, I feared what keeping him safe might turn us into. By morning, the hospital no longer pretended to be neutral ground. The windows that had once shown a slice of gray dawn were now flanked by men who didn't wear scrubs and didn't carry clipboards. Phones buzzed constantly. Voices stayed low. Every entrance and exit was controlled. Luca slept through most of it, drugged into a fragile calm that made my chest ache every time his breathing stuttered. Mateo hadn't left. Not once. When I woke from a half-doze curled uncomfortably in the chair, he was still there, jacket off now, sleeves rolled up, standing near the window and speaking quietly into his phone. His voice was clipped, efficient, merciless in a way I remembered too well. "No, too visible. Move it underground. If they breathe the wrong way, I want to know." He ended the call and turned the moment he realized I was awake. "You're not taking him anywhere," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Anger flared, sharp and immediate. "You don't get to issue commands. Not to me. Not about my son." "Our son," he corrected quietly. I stood, every nerve screaming. You lost the right to that word 5 years ago. A flicker of pain crossed his face before the mask dropped back into place. I lost the right because you decided it for me. "I decided because your life is a battlefield," I shot back. "And now you're turning my child into territory." His jaw tightened. "I'm turning him into someone protected." "I didn't ask for this," I said. "I didn't ask for armed men and locked doors and whispers in hallways." "No," he agreed, "but you walked him into it." The words cut deeper than he knew. "I'm taking him home as soon as he's stable," I said. "We'll disappear again." His eyes hardened. "You won't." I laughed bitterly. "You think I care what you want?" He took a step closer, not threatening, not crowding, just close enough to make me feel the pull I'd sworn I'd buried. "I think," he said calmly, "that if you try to leave, you'll be placing a target on his back." "I lived with that fear for 5 years," I snapped. "Alone. I managed." "You managed because no one knew he existed," he replied. "That's over." As if summoned by the words, his phone buzzed. Once. Twice. He looked at the screen and something in his expression changed. "What?" I asked sharply. He answered the call instead, turning his back halfway to me, voice low, controlled. "Where?" Silence. "When?" He ended the call slowly, then looked at me. "They found your apartment," he said. "The one you left tonight." The air left my lungs. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." "They broke in," he continued. "Clean, quiet. Whoever did it wasn't looking for electronics or money." I shook my head. "You're lying." "They went straight to the bedroom," he said softly. "To the closet where you hide his school backpack." Ice crawled down my spine. "There was a message," he added, "on the mirror." My throat closed. "What message?" He hesitated, just for a breath. "Bring the boy." The words echoed in my head like a gunshot. My knees gave out. I gripped the bed rail, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "This," Mateo said quietly, moving closer again, "is why you don't get to run." Tears burned behind my eyes, hot with fear, rage, and something dangerously close to relief. "I tried to keep him out of your world," I whispered. "I did everything right." "You did everything alone," he said, "and you're exhausted." I laughed shakily. "You think this is about rest?" "No," he said. "It's about trust." I looked at him then, really looked, at the man who had once frightened me with how easily he controlled rooms, with how little mercy he showed enemies, at the man now standing in a guarded hospital room, eyes flicking repeatedly to a sleeping child as if nothing else mattered. "You don't trust me," I said. "Not entirely," he answered honestly. "But I trust you with him." "And I don't trust you," I said. "Not with his future. Not with his innocence." Something softened in his eyes. "I know." Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken memories. The way he used to brush my hair back when I was tired. The arguments we never finished. The nights I'd lain awake beside him, listening to his phone vibrate in the dark. "I'll stay," I said finally, the words tasting like surrender. "For now. Until he's better." "For as long as it takes," he said. I met his gaze. "This doesn't mean I forgive you." "No," he replied quietly, "but it means you're not alone anymore." That was the problem. As I looked at him, standing guard over our son with lethal calm and unexpected gentleness, I felt something old stir, something dangerous. Because the greatest scar between us had never been fear. It was love, and it was still very much alive. It happened just before dawn. That was how these things always worked, when exhaustion softened reflexes, when hope dared to creep in. Luca's fever had finally begun to break, his breathing slower, steadier. I'd allowed myself to rest my head against the edge of the bed, fingers still wrapped around his small hand, listening to the rhythm of machines and convincing myself we had survived the worst of it. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to raise every hair on my arms. Mateo was on his feet instantly. He didn't speak, didn't reach for a weapon. He just moved, fluid, precise, positioning himself between the bed and the door, as if his body had memorized that purpose long before tonight. "What is it?" I whispered. "Stay with him," he murmured. "No matter what." The hallway outside erupted in noise, shouted commands, running footsteps, the unmistakable clatter of a metal cart hitting the floor. Then the alarms did go off. Not the gentle, looping chime of medical alerts, but the harsh, pulsing wail of a security breach. The door keypad flashed red, locked. Then it flickered green, unlocked. "No," I breathed. The door began to slide open. Mateo moved. The next moments blurred together in sharp fragments. Sound without context. Motion without time. A man in scrubs lunging through the opening too fast, too focused. Not medical? Never medical? His eyes went straight past Mateo, to the bed, to Luca. Mateo intercepted him without a word. The impact was violent but swift. A brutal twist of motion that drove the man into the wall with a muffled crack. Mateo caught him before his body could slump loudly to the floor, lowering him with practiced efficiency. Another figure appeared, this one wearing security gear. A gun flashed. Mateo didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. He slammed the door half shut with his foot, using the narrow gap to disarm the man in a blur of movement so fast my brain struggled to keep up. A sharp snap of bone. A grunt cut short. The gun slid across the floor and disappeared beneath a cabinet. All the while, Mateo kept his voice low. "Sleep," he murmured to Luca, who had stirred, eyes fluttering open. "You're dreaming." I scooped Luca into my arms, turning his face into my chest, covering his ears. "Mom?" he mumbled, confused. "It's okay," I whispered, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. "Just rest. I've got you." More footsteps thundered past the door. Voices barked orders. Someone yelled Mateo's name. When it was over, because with Mateo things were always over, not merely paused, the room felt wrecked in ways I couldn't see. The lights steadied. The alarms cut off. New men arrived, men who moved with Mateo's same silent authority. The two intruders were gone before Luca fully woke. No blood, no screams, no chaos left behind. Just control. Mateo turned to me then, hands steady, expression calm in that terrifying way that said he'd already calculated every possible outcome. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, unable to speak. He knelt beside us, checking Luca gently, pulse, breathing, comfort, every movement soft, careful, as if he hadn't just dismantled two grown men in a space meant for healing. Luca yawned. "Bad dream," he murmured. "I know," Mateo said. "You're safe." Luca nodded, reassured by the certainty in his voice, and drifted back to sleep. When Mateo finally stood, his jaw was tight, eyes dark with something that burned beneath control. "They weren't amateurs," he said to the men in the hallway. "This was a probe. They wanted speed, not subtlety." "And the child?" one asked. Mateo's gaze flicked to us. Steel entered his voice. "Untouchable!" The word echoed through me. When the doors were secured again and the room fell quiet, I slumped into the chair, legs shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. "That could have been him," I whispered. "They could have taken him." "They won't," Matteo said. "You can't guarantee that." "No," he agreed, "but I can guarantee this." He crouched in front of me, voice low, intense, but not commanding. "The danger was never me, amore," he said. "It's everyone who wants what I have. The power, the leverage, the air." He hesitated before that last word, then committed to it fully. "He is not bait," he continued. "He is not collateral. Anyone who treats him as such doesn't get a second chance." I stared at him, finally understanding the truth I'd been running from. The world wasn't dangerous because of Matteo. It was dangerous because he stood at the center of it. And now, so did our son. I looked down at Luca, safe for the moment, unaware of how close the night had come to changing him forever. And for the first time, I understood something with painful clarity. Running hadn't saved us. It had only delayed the inevitable. The only reason Luca was still in my arms was because Matteo knew exactly how to fight this world, and he would burn it to the ground before letting it take his child. Morning came softly after the longest night of my life. Luca slept through most of it, his fever finally broken, his color returning in gradual shades, pink at his cheeks, warmth in his hands. The doctor spoke in careful optimism, the kind meant to prepare you for setbacks, but allow hope to breathe. The infection had responded. The danger had passed. With monitoring, medication, and time, he would recover fully. I sank into the chair beside his bed and cried for the first time since we'd arrived. Silent tears, exhausted ones. Not fear anymore. Relief. Matteo stood by the window while the doctor spoke, arms folded, posture still, but something in him had changed. The rigid tension that had wrapped around him like armor since he arrived was looser. Still alert, still dangerous, but no longer braced for immediate war. When the doctor left, Matteo turned to me. "He'll be transferred to a private recovery wing this afternoon," he said. 2 more days, maybe 3. Then home. Home. The word landed heavier than it should have. "Whose?" I asked quietly. He didn't deflect it. That mattered. "We need to talk," he said. Not a command. An invitation. Lucas stirred then, blinking awake, groggy and confused but lucid. He smiled faintly when he saw me. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm here, baby." Matteo moved back instantly, giving us space, and I noticed that, how deliberate it was, how intentional. It wasn't natural to him, this restraint. It was chosen. After Luca drifted back to sleep, Matteo pulled a chair close, not too close, and sat. "I won't insult you by pretending this can go back to how it was," he said. "It can't. You and Luca are seen now." I swallowed. I never wanted him seen. "I know," he replied. "You believed hiding him was protecting him." "I believed distance was protecting him." "And now?" His gaze held mine, steady, waiting. "Now I don't know," I admitted. "Because hiding almost killed him. And your world almost took him." He nodded once, which means we decide together. That nearly broke me. We talked until the light outside shifted fully into day. About custody, real custody, not ownership dressed as generosity. Shared decisions. Legal frameworks that existed beyond his influence. Schools vetted not just for prestige, but safety and normalcy. A house that had exits that weren't guarded. A life where Luca could have friends who didn't come with background checks. "I will not raise my son in a gilded bunker," I said fiercely. "And I will not raise him without knowing where he is," Matteo replied just as firmly. "So, we compromise." "Yes." I laid out boundaries like terms in a ceasefire. No moving him across borders without my consent. No weapons visible in his presence. No secrets about threats that could reach him. Therapy, if needed, real therapy. Not controlled voices telling him who to trust. And me. "I don't belong to you," I said, voice steady now. "Not because we were married once. Not because you're his father. If there's a future here, it's not because I'm boxed in by fear." Mateo leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "I don't want to own you," he said quietly. "I never did. I was taught that love was possession, that power was proof. I was wrong." I searched his face for arrogance, for manipulation. Found none. "I am asking you," he continued, "to let me earn back what I assumed I was owed. Your trust, your presence, your belief that I won't turn him, or you, into something small." His voice lowered. "Stay because you choose to, not because you're trapped." The air felt thin as I nodded. "We'll try," I said. "But slowly, on my terms too." He exhaled, a sound that felt like relief after years underwater. Later that evening, when Luca was awake and asking for pudding and cartoons, a woman appeared quietly at the door. Older, sharp-eyed, professional. She handed me a folder. "I was instructed to give this directly to you," she said. Mateo stiffened when he saw it. "What is that?" I asked. "Records," the woman replied. "Archived, sealed until now." When she left, I opened it with shaking hands. Police reports, financial transfers, a restraining order request I'd never filed, and one stamped document that made my heart stop. A threat assessment, dated 5 years ago, marked credible. Under reason for relocation, one sentence glared back at me. Subject advised immediate departure for maternal and fetal safety. I looked up at Mateo, breath unsteady. "I didn't just run," I whispered. "No," he said slowly. "You were pushed.